now is your chance to use social media for or against what I'm saying. So do your part and let's promote the industry. With the different roadmaps and targets flying around, let's see what we can pick from them and know which ones to support. IVPAP, SAPI, CHIPS Act, and then improving our business scenario. So EIAPI was started in 1986 with Alex and a few of our friends. And basically, we're doing it, hopefully up to now, supporting the industry, interfacing with academia, and even at one time, some hobbyists. So among our friends, we sought for information that we could not find. We can only talk to the large manufacturers. So you know who they are. They're still around, but we want to think that design and development covers a certain area of the sector which could not be readily covered by the large association. So we set up EIAPI. So this is a picture of what you might see or what they would see from the IVPAP colleagues because they mainly work at night. So just to give you an inkling of what they're doing, they're basically at the same level of the electronics hardware that we are right now. They're at the around 40 billion level in terms of exports. And they're looking at moving this to about 58 billion by 2028. And that might move to 2030, but more or less 58 billion. So that's about $20,000 per person, and per person on 2025. So that's about 93,000 per month per person on average. So you could just imagine the margins that could be had by the sector on IT BPO. And those are the things that we would like to have as electronics guys, diba? Because more or less right now, we're more or less limited to 22, maybe 20, 25% value add. So this is a graph of where they're at right now. The point, the triangle is about 2025. So that's about 40 billion here and about 1.8 million headcount. And look at the 58 billion that they're looking at. No? Parang they're not running out of steam. So hopefully the electronics sector that we're in, sana ganyan din tayo. Maybe they have a secret somewhere. Okay. So that's on more of the IT BPO. Let's look at the CHIPS Act, which was actually canceled by you-know-who. So instead of relying on USAID, I think what they're looking at is we will get some funds somewhere, and the government will fund it, basically, in lieu of the USAID funds. Okay. And for this, the hardware guys are looking at 110 billion by 2030, of which 70 billion is on the semiconductor side and 40 billion on the electronics manufacturing services and IC design. And basically right now, so basically we're about the same, 44 billion, and they're looking at increasing it to by 20% per year, up to 110 billion. And on the graduate side, we're looking at about 60,000 right now, and we're extending it to 128K by 2030, or at 16% per year. So more or less, you're looking at hardware and software sectors, more or less the same, okay? I don't know who copied whom, but there's a new guy on the block, that's the Philippine IC Design Association, or PICDA, and there are 13 companies right now, and I think about 1,000 designers. I don't know their future figures yet, but let's wish them good luck. You know these guys, di ba? They're nearby. So actually, Doc Paringit gave me this link. Parang nahihiya kasi ako to look at somebody else's roadmap. We should have done that a long time ago. So they made the roadmap for the next 30 years. 30 ba? 20 years. Up to 2030, up to 2040, up to 2050. If you've been to some of those reports, they look like the economic plan of China. That's about how they look, decades at a time. Unlike ours, we don't even have one like this. So during one kapihan we had in Cabuyao, I remarked that we might as well copy this. At least they have a plan. No. Okay. So let's look at the details. So they're looking at 100, 200, and 300 design companies for each decade. 1, 2, and 3 small-scale semiconductor plants, and packaging plants, OSAT. Those are the outsourced semiconductor assembly and test. 10, 15, and 20. Right now, the Philippines has about 8 to 10 OSATs also. So just looking at that, parang nagkopyahan nga, di ba? And on our end, we don't know if we could match the 100, 200, and 300. But at least they are, and as Dr. Paringit said, talagang resolute sila, talagang we want to do it, we want to be there. So this is their plan. Okay, so these are more details. Revenue of the semiconductor is 25 billion, 50 billion by 2030, 2040, and 100 billion by 2050. So that's ano ba yun? Two times for every decade. And that's about 8% per year. So, the value added rate of 15% to 10 to 15%, 15 to 20, and 20 to 25%. And that's more or less what we have also right now. So, hindi nakakalayo. Parang nagkopyahan nga, if you will. But at least it says that more or less we are on the right track. But look at these, 225 billion per year, revenue of the electronics sector. We are only at 8 billion. Why is that? Sa kanila talagang ambisyon nila, 225, 10 times of the revenue of the semiconductor sector. Actually, the electronic sector would always be maybe about 10 times the semiconductor. Paano, in a typical electronic product like your cell phone, etc., the semiconductors only take about maybe 10, 15, 20, 25% of the total cost of your product. The rest are electronics. So maybe from there, and that's how they look at it. 225 versus 25, 485, 50. That's about 10 times. So more or less, yung ratio na yun is okay. What keeps me awake lang is, why is that? So why can they plan on that big a figure, whereas we couldn't? Now, going back down, value added of 10 to 15, 15, 20, 20, 25%. That's, again, okay, and that's more or less the going rate, and that's where we are also. So, but what we don't have is the 225, 485, and 1045. So you guys, kayo maghahabol nun. I'm already 74, so you have a lot of miles to go. So you should run after those. Sayang yun. Those are the Samsungs. Those are the Foxconn, JBL, etc. Those are what we don't have. So why is that? So baka yun yung tanong niyo mamaya. Okay. So yun. sayang na sayang yun. They won't employ as many engineers as the semicon guys do, but all the other manufacturing guys, nandito lahat yun. No? Sayang yun. Yun yung what we need as a country, not just as a sector. Okay? So, going back to the Philippines, we can still do a lot of improvements to improve our efficiency and possibly make our environment more business-friendly. So here are several things we can do. Make it easier to buy from PESA locators. Alam ba niyo yun? Or hindi niyo problema yun? Madali sa inyo mag-order through FedEx and DHL or whatever. When actually, the manufacturing plant is only in the next town or next city. But you have to order it and go around the globe. So that's what we want to change, and it's not it's not a law of nature. It's just a PESA memorandum. I don't think it's even a law. So kailangan ma-change yun. Otherwise, you tied your own hands. Okay. So number 2, make information readily available from certain entities. We need that information to be able to complete our supply chain. So yun yung mga kailangan. Because of privacy, etc., I don't know, question mark. Number 3, so if we change those 2 and we improve our supply chain, we will become a Korea, Hong Kong, Japan, Singapore, and all the parts will be available to one and every engineer. Baka magalit si Alex Han. Baka puro freebies na pamimigay ng mga companies here. Don't worry, marami pang ibang parts na wala dito. So you take care of the rest. So okay lang yun. But that's what you need, and that's what I went through. That's why we set up EIAPI, for example. Yun yung problema natin. That's why your hands are tied. So you're limited to what you can do. And that ties down the hands of future electrical engineers, etc. No? Actually, it's another cuento. The IC design companies are finding it hard to get electronics engineers. And they're the ones that they want, not the computer science engineers. They want the electronics engineers. The ECAs kasi, I would guess, they can draw the whole picture. They can translate from hardware or semiconductor design, and doesn't matter. Madali sa kanya i-comprehend yun. But for the software guys, mahirap yun. Baka imposible pa nga sabihin nila. So the ECA guys will make it very easy, and that's why the IC design companies would rather get ECEs, at least for certain operations. No? Okay. So hopefully, with those parts available, it will be easier for us to invite more students to take up electronics and fill up our design companies and electronics companies. And lastly, and all of this promotes design and development. For example, DTI was looking at how do we incentivize the making of mobility devices, electronic cars or whatever, electric vehicles. But actually, you have that number 1 problem. Nandito na nga yung vendors, kaya lang, the makers, kaya lang, they cannot avail of the incentives, whatever, because theoretically, they have to import it back. No? They have to get it through DHL or whatever. So they have to break the barriers of PESA and remove it. It's only by law. And if you ask me, dapat mawala lahat yun. Paano, shall we say, the PESA companies, locators, have already, quote-unquote, paid for the price by coming here and supplying their markets. So parang if we remove that part, that constriction, then it should be easier to do all of these other things. But in the end, we need to promote. They have no choice. Even if your proposal is superior, make sure you have a large, maybe 10 to 20% component to promote your product. Otherwise, wala. Sigurado walang commercialization mangyayari doon. No one will see your product. So you have to have a built-in promotion program for your product or service. Okay? So, questions. Why can another ASEAN country source 85% from their local suppliers and they only have to import 15%? While the Philippine office of the same company can only source 15% locally and they have to import 85% for the rest of the parts. Bakit kaya ganon? Well, obviously it says that there's a problem with our supply chain. No? But if you ask me, baka there's something else behind that. I don't know. Baka some of you guys, maybe you have relatives, they might know, especially if they came from these companies. Okay. Number 2, benchmarking, industry monitoring by everyone. Have you seen the industry write-ups of India, Vietnam? Actually, even IBPAP, if you look at IBPAP, they are something that we should have also in the electronics sector. Wala pa tayo nun, sayang. So, but which comes first, chicken or the egg? So, anyway, so that's my comment. We should have something like that. And the last one, okay, IBPAP as a secret. Around 2004, I went to Bong Boha, the head of People Support, and asked him, "Oh, Bong, paano niyo nagawa yan? High flyer na kagad ang mga call centers. You've only had a few years starting from 2000, ano? Biglang nagliliparan na yung mga call centers dito. Anong sikreto niyo?" Anong sikreto nyo? Ang sikreto namin, wala kaming sikreto. Ulit. Ang sikreto namin, wala kaming sikreto. In other words, we tour everyone who comes to the Philippines, even if we know that potentially he is our competitor. So, yun, pasok naman sila ng pasok. So up to now, pasok ba rin ng pasok yung mga foreign companies? Okay. So obviously, they don't give away their account information. Confidential yon, no? Yung mga, kung sino yung customer nila, you don't have to divulge that. But everything else, oh, come one, come all, punta kayo sa Philippines. So for that, palaki ng palaki yung IBPAP sector. Hopefully, sa electronics, ganun din tayo. And there's something else in the electronics, I don't know why. So sa kanila kasi, their objective is to make the call center sector grow, helps their companies justify their existence, the quality, etc. And they become credible globally. And so, nagsasign up. Wala silang problema. So hopefully, ganun din sa atin. Thank you very much.